Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. You have a map of the world behind you.
Actually, it's not a map of the world. Can you guess what it's a map of? I think I'm going to have a contest. The first viewer to guess what it's a map of.
It's a map of Antarctica and the lower half of Pangaea.
Okay, your guess is in. We'll wait for the other ones and award the prize in due course. I will say it's a deeply significant map to me.
It's
That's the only clue I'll
upside down.
give. What?
It is upside down.
Well, that can be part of the guess. Is it upside down? Is it right side? Speaking of upside down, Mickey, we're living in Trump's America. And you got what you wanted. Trump is president. How you liking these apples?
So far, okay. It has some ups and downs.
Many Americans would agree so far. Ups and downs.
He seems to have. I wasn't expecting this question. It's too obvious. But his Supreme Court appointment was good. So good that it was off the news pages immediately and did him no good at all. If it had been more controversial, then he could have, strung it out for a few more days of good press. But no, this guy's such a shoo-in that the press has basically stopped covering him. He decided to do a lot of things. I was worried that he would do the Republicans' agenda, tax cuts and a bunch of things, repealing Obamacare, a bunch of things I don't really care about, and not do the agenda that I care about. It turns out exactly the opposite. He did as much of his immigration agenda as he could through executive orders very quickly. That's the good side. The downside is he doesn't seem to have felt any need to explain this to the public before he puts out these executive orders. So you're happy with the travel ban, which some people would call a Muslim ban. I was going to go through them one by one. His big achievement is, I think, immigration through the South is now effectively discouraged. No matter what Congress does, he's empowered the Border Patrol. He's cracking down on sanctuary cities. I think people sort of get the message, even if he doesn't build the wall.
What's he empowered the Border Patrol to do?
To go after a much broader range of people. Obama had this very restrictive rule that basically if you hadn't committed armed robbery or murder, you were not going to be deported. And, Trump has said, no, you can go back to the status quo ante, which is you deport a whole lot more people for a whole lot more crimes than that. And if it's also true that if somebody who hasn't committed a crime sort of comes across the Border Patrol's radar, they might be deported too. So there's always a risk. So in general, I don't think America is as welcoming to illegal immigrants as it was during the later Obama years. And in welfare reform, the big lesson of welfare reform is people like me were spending obsessive energy figuring out what the work requirements were. Did it require 1 year of education, or did it allow you to have 2? None of those legislative details made any difference. The only thing that made a difference was the signal it sent to people in America, which is welfare isn't there forever. The rules have changed. You better get to work. And that had a huge effect. Similarly, whether Trump builds 50 miles of wall or 60 miles or 600 miles of wall, the message has been sent through the practical impact of his executive orders that the rules have changed. So that's good.
You think that's a job offer from the administration? You better pick it up.
I've been waiting.
They could use somebody to do a little writing for them. They just issued this list of terrorist attacks, and they kept spelling attacker without a C.
It's from Insurance Service. Do you think I should pick it up?
No, not in Trump's America. You're secure and safe in Trump's America, Mickey.
Anyway, the second thing is the immigration orders. I care about immigration because it lowers the wages of unskilled Americans. I care less about the immigration terrorist connection, although it's there. I think the order is within his legal authority to do. Would I have done it now? Is it worth the blowback from adding to the narrative of America hates Islam? You could easily convince me, and you probably will convince me during the course of this vlog that it's probably a bad idea. He also should have explained it. I think the blowback was effective, all the demonstrations, and they've basically convinced me, and I hope a lot of other people, that America's self-image is we are the home for refugees. So we don't want to go back to the days where refugees are zero. And I think that was a good thing to come out of it too. So what I expected to happen, which is Trump does something and he's restrained. So far as he said he's going to obey the courts, he might well lose in the courts, which is sort of shocking. And then is he going to defy a Supreme Court order about this? I don't think so. So all good.
Yeah, so the first issue you talked about, it has been your big hobby horse issue, as me and other friends were expressing dismay that you supported Trump. Did you, by the way, have you ever admitted that you support Trump? You did commit a Freudian slip when we taped in the summer, and you said that's why I support Trump. So we know you actually do. But have you now gone public? Are you out of the closet as a Trump supporter?
Well, I was badgered by Jim Fallows, which was really annoying, but it turned out to be a good thing because I did write something saying I voted for Trump, and then explaining that I was in a safe state. It was a safe vote in California because he wasn't going to win California. But I sort of said I could understand people elsewhere in the country supporting Trump. So I basically was pro-Trump, yes. And so
okay.
I'm glad Fallows made me write that.
So and your big reason for being pro-Trump had been immigration from the South specifically. That's been your hobby horse for years. That has been what led you to do what, as I said, I and many of your other friends viewed with dismay, which is actually support Trump. And I guess a question I have is
there were other issues too, but
what are the big other issues?
He, for a Republican, said he wasn't going to mess around with Medicare and Social Security, which I liked. He he was skeptical of trade. I'm probably more skeptical than I am, but I think a pause in the hell bent for leather rush to pure globalism in trade is probably a good thing. And as we've discussed before, he was relatively non-neocon on foreign policy. Now, how you drive that with Elliott Abrams being Undersecretary of State, I don't know.
Is that official now, by the way? There have been reports that they're going to nominate Elliott Abrams as Deputy Secretary of State?
There have been reports, and there are also reports that Tillerson is pushing back, or somebody's pushing back.
Well, Tillerson probably is, and Rand Paul has said he will oppose him.
Oh, Rand Paul. Sorry, not Tillerson.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been... if Tillerson was pushing back, it wouldn't even have been mentioned. So, right. It's Rand Paul, for good reason. Anyway, you and I both... I think we agree that America... sort of tried to rub the end of the Cold War into Putin's face in Ukraine and somehow wrest Ukraine out of the Russian orbit and into the European orbit, which the Ukrainians probably want, but was unnecessary and an unnecessary sort of poke in the eye. And certainly Trump seems to realize that. So that's a good thing.
Well, I mean, we'll see what's a good thing here. His foreign policy is, I was saying, during the campaign, there were these people who, like me, are kind of on the left and had maybe a somewhat realist view of foreign policy, who were embracing Trump, or at least flirting with embracing him for this reason. I said, man, I mean, the idea that you can infer some kind of coherent foreign policy from whatever the hell this guy says on the campaign trail is crazy. And I think that's proven to be true. I mean, he said he would be, non-interventionist. Well, he's the guy who put boots on the ground in Yemen, managed to kill an 8-year-old kid, didn't manage to do what they thought they were going to do. And he's actually been lucky in how little press he's gotten on that. So, but anyway, that's not what he said he would do. He said he would keep us out of unnecessary wars.
You undertake a risky raid, and there's a risk that it will fail, and we don't know.
Meanwhile, but he's saber-rattling with China, with Iran. He said he almost ran on an anti-war platform, and he's proven to be the opposite so far. Now, it's true that he may or may not continue to cozy up to Russia. The signals are mixed. I just saw a thing online saying that Flynn is preparing some anti-Russian initiative. But anyway, let's get around to foreign policy. The one thing I want to ask is, are the issues that you support him on, which I think is overwhelmingly immigration from the South, are they so important to
Immigration, not why immigration from the South.
Well, you're mainly worried about low-wage Latin American workers, aren't you?
Well, they're low-wage workers from other places in the world, and they can come here by airplane and overstay their visas. So,
they tend not to. I mean, the people from
China has overtaken Latin America as I think the number one.
Yeah, but it's not so much competition for blue-collar jobs, right?
Some are, some aren't. But
anyway, my question is like
to be reified into Latin America.
Has nothing he's done given you pause? Have you not come anywhere near going, this my big issue is important, but I suppose he could be so bad in so many other realms that I would have to withdraw my support? That hasn't occurred to you yet?
No, that happens every 4 or 5 days.
Good. What are the things that have bothered you the most?
It last happened when he tweeted about the judge, the so-called judge.
Yeah, well,
because it was so stupid. I mean, it increases the chance that he's going to lose the case. Anybody who knows anything about the courts knows that they don't go off all the time on what the actual legal rationale is. Right. If you get their backup, they're just going to say, this guy needs taking down, and that's what's happening now, I think, in the courts, and why he may well lose the immigration executive order now is because the law is on his side, but the judges and justice...
Yeah, but it isn't just politically stupid. It's like bad for America when members of one of the three branches start trying to fundamentally undermine the credibility of and respect for the other branch. I just think that's bad. And I think the big question is it stupid or is it part of a larger plan? I mean, and that's true with so many of these things.
And there's a question of whether Trump would even be unhappy if he lost in the Supreme Court.
Right. Wouldn't he rather have the enemies?
But don't remember that the original rap against Trump was he wouldn't obey the Supreme Court. So I think I'm reassured that he will obey the Supreme Court. It's an open question. It might not. But so the big constitutional crisis, I think, isn't going to happen. And then, so now we're just on a tactical question.
We are all happy.
I don't care that much about the executive order. I don't care if he's happy or not if it gets stopped. If it gets stopped, then he has the issue. So he has the issue. It's a legitimate issue, though he's well within his rights to do it.
Right, but I think
why is that alarming?
But the reason I want to decipher the whole executive order thing, the travel ban in particular, and like what his plan is, if any, is, well, I want to know what his actual plan is. Like how malign it is, and I think it is pretty malign, and I think the reason it is largely Steve Bannon's plan, and
everybody thinks Bannon's this Svengali. He's a very energetic, smart guy, but does he really think that he's going to govern by keeping the 40% of the population that supports Trump stoked up?
Look,
meanwhile, the 60% gets furious at him. I don't think that's
for Trump to have
realizes that.
Given what given what Donald Trump values in people, for him to have in his inner circle a guy who dresses so badly and has such bad grooming habits must mean this guy has some kind of strange control over Trump's mind. Well, this is exactly the kind of guy Trump hates to have out. He's a slob. I mean, can you still say that, or is that like in Obama's world of political correctness? Can I not say slob?
He wears safari jackets. No, I think that's a good point.
It is a good point. It's like, this is like, and it's concerning that Trump is this much in his thrall. But to get back to the issues, I mean, here's what I mean. For example, like the issue on the travel ban, including green card holders. Now, not only did they include them in the first place, but reportedly, when the everything hit the fan and Kelly, the Homeland Security guy, said let's at least take green card holders out of this, Bannon still gave him pushback. Now you got to ask. Wait, I want to ask the question. Just wait. It's like
that story was misreported.
Well, no, it's not clear what part was misreported. I think Josh Rogan, who's made a couple of big mistakes actually in reporting early on, but listen, no, what I think is what has been contested is what has been contested is that Bannon paid him an actual visit. I haven't heard anybody say no, Bannon didn't give him any blowback.
Once one guy reports one piece of bullshit, who knows whether the rest of his story...
Okay, set that aside. The decision to include green card holders in the first place. Now, obviously, some reports were that Bannon had been saying, well, we got to do a travel thing early on to fire up the base. Okay, fine. You didn't have to, if this is just for political purposes, you don't have to include the green card holders. You just need the symbolic thing, these 7 Muslim countries, blah, blah, blah. Your base is fine with it. Now, so ask, why do they want to add the green card? And I think this is fundamental because I think the answer is Bannon. Bannon wants to send a signal to Muslims that they are not welcome here. And,
well, there are two theories on that. One is shock and awe, send people a message that things have changed. The more disruption initially, the better, because it gets publicity for the new regime. And the second is that it made sense. There are people who argue that the vetting for green cards has been bad, and they wanted to give them all another look. And the way you give them all another look is by making them each get waivers. There are not that many of them, so
yeah, but meanwhile you've got the predictable. Meanwhile, you've got the predictable blowback, like people who just went abroad and suddenly their family's in America and they never get to see them again, and they've been here for 8 years, as a CEO or something. I mean, this is crazy. It's obviously crazy, and Bannon was inviting that craziness.
I think as a PR matter, it was stupid, and
yeah, and Bannon's not stupid. You said so yourself. So I think we have to ask, what is he doing? And I think the more you look at Bannon, the more scared you should be. He is a really troubling figure. He is a true ethno-nationalist. It's clear in what he said, and most troubling of all is he embraces, welcomes, and wants to hasten a clash of civilizations. He hasn't quite said that, but this is like a tragedy for American foreign policy. We have been stumbling toward a clash of civilizations, but now we actually have an administration that wants it.
You don't have him. You can't point to any part where he says it, and you can't point to any where.
Well, you have got him at various times saying, we have to, Judeo-Christian civilization is headed for a big fight and we have to steel ourselves for it. He is saying things like that. And more broadly, as far as his ethno-nationalism. He wants to hasten
the coming Armageddon-like conflict.
Well, if you look at the different things the administration is doing, they're highly consistent with that hypothesis. Okay.
What about this story that I just linked to, which was not wildly credible, but said that actually Trump is very popular in the Middle East because they are trying to control their own radical Islamist factions, and he gives them an excuse to crack down. And this particularly was a message to Pakistan. Everybody focuses on the 7 countries, but he might have been sending a message to Pakistan saying, "Look, just these 7 countries now, but you're next, buddy, unless you crack down on your radical Islamists." And in fact, right after Trump imposed the ban, they arrested this big troublemaker who they had been avoiding arresting for a while. Now, maybe it was just for show, but it seems to have had some sort of effect in terms of pushing countries that aren't on the list to do things we want them to do. So maybe that was the rationale.
I don't get how the effect works.
The judge in Seattle has no idea if this was the rationale. He's just saying, why are these 7 countries? What
was that's the other thing is why these 7 countries?
Well,
they're majority Muslim countries. He
inherited from Obama, and he probably figured, well, it's safe just to.
No, with Obama, I mean, it was a very different thing with Obama, as you know. It was like if people had traveled, they could be Europeans, and if they've traveled to these countries, because then it wasn't ethnic with Obama, as I understand. It wasn't ethnic in the same way.
The point is that they were troubled, conflicted countries that maybe
haven't sent us a single lethal terrorist ever. Yeah, whereas the ones that have sent us lethal terrorists are not on the list. I mean, don't you think obviously a big part of this was just he wanted something that people would read as a Muslim ban, and it really, it is once he starts. I mean, it's not a ban on all Muslims, but within each country, once they start saying, as they did, well, religious minorities may be exempted if they can claim persecution. Well, if you ban in a majority Muslim country from which religious minorities are exempted, that's a Muslim ban, right? Does that trouble you at all?
Well, the preference for minorities doesn't just apply to those 7 countries. It applies across the board. So in some places it'll protect Muslims. In some places it'll protect Yazidis. In some places it'll protect Jews. In some places it'll protect the Baha'i.
Yeah, but in the other places they don't need the exemption in other places because there's no ban to begin with.
Well, no, this is a general preference in terms of picking refugees to come to America. We take refugees from all over. We take half the world's resettled refugees.
I'm just saying, he says it's not a Muslim ban, but it applies only to Muslim majority countries and exempts non-Muslims. Okay? That sounds like a Muslim ban of sorts to me.
Didn't exempt the Syria ban. There were all sorts of Christians who were blocked from coming from Syria. That's why he's going to have to restart.
Right, but they have an avenue of appeal. They can now say, I'm a persecuted minority. Muslims can't.
No, they're all blocked from Syria. They can't come. In fact, it's what some of the stories have been. These poor Christian Syrians not coming. I mean,
well, didn't the administration say?
He wants to help the Christian Syrians, yet he's blocked them from coming.
Didn't the administration say that persecuted minority religions in these countries may be exempt?
No, I think he said when we restart in general, we will give a preference to the extent permitted by law. It's like a self-effacing order. To the extent permitted by law, we will give preference to persecuted minorities. So it doesn't quite make a whole lot of sense, but it's not a Muslim ban. It's a pro-persecuted minority thing. I think what he wanted a Muslim ban. Everybody told him you can't do that. You got to do this. So he did this, and this is legal, and the Muslim ban maybe is much less legal.
Okay. Then if then I may stand corrected about that if that doesn't apply now. The persecuted minorities have no avenue whatever of appeal right now.
My impression is everybody can get a waiver, but the persecuted minority thing doesn't apply to the granting of waivers. I have to read it again. Maybe it does.
Okay, as long as we're on this subject, I'm gonna just say the one thing that I would have hoped would have been the deal breaker for you. If notwithstanding what Trump does for you on low-wage immigration or whatever, the thing that I just kind of have trouble, that is really deeply, deeply troubling to me, is like, okay, we've got 3 million American Muslims, and I'm sure you agree, they're American citizens, they deserve exactly the respect other people get, and the Constitution protection and so on. Okay, so Trump, on Inauguration Day, he has his private sermon for his family and a few others. He chooses a reverend, a pastor who has said Islam is evil. Then for the inauguration itself, included in the festivities is Franklin Graham, another pastor who has said Islam is evil. Now his most important advisor, Steve Bannon, has said that he sees Islam as basically a and by the way, everybody on this should listen to the recent Fresh Air that featured Sarah Posner, who's also been on Blogging Heads here, but she did the reporting on this. Steve Bannon has said Islam is really a political ideology masquerading as a religion. Those may not be his exact words, but Michael Flynn, National Security Advisor, has said basically the same thing. And an implication of that, by the way, would be that Muslims might not enjoy protection under the Constitution that other religions enjoy. Okay, so these are just if you add all this up, Trump is saying, to me unambiguously, to 3 million American Muslims, you are not welcome here. We don't want you here. And I don't see how your concerns about wage competition or anything else could override something of that magnitude. I really don't.
I don't know. America had a bunch of really racist laws during the New Deal, and the New Deal was a good thing for America. You got around to the racist laws later.
But wait, were the racist laws a reversion at that time in history? In other words, did Roosevelt come on and say, well, we're going to improve things economically, but let's impose a whole bunch of new restrictions on black people. I mean, maybe he did, in which case I'd have to rethink my views on Roosevelt. Did he do that?
I think Jim Crow was an ongoing thing that certainly was a reversion to what the situation was immediately after the Civil War, and it was a reversion it was a retrogression.
What was?
Well, Jim Crow, as I understand, my crude, elementary school knowledge is after the Civil War there was Reconstruction, and then the white establishment cracked down with Jim Crow.
Yeah, but FDR didn't do that, did he?
No, but he had the support of.
I don't understand the analogy. I'm asking you. This is the package Trump is bringing in, the things you like, and this whole new thing of trying to intimidate and alienate American Muslims, which, by the way, leave aside the moral critique, it's just stupid if your goal is to prevent homegrown terrorism. It's both immoral and stupid on a large scale.
It's stupid politics anyway. He doesn't give he needs somebody to write the 2 paragraphs in speech saying, Muslims are welcome here. This isn't a Muslim ban. Refugees are welcome here. We're still going to take refugees.
Do you think it's an accident that he hasn't written that? Or that he says nothing when a mosque burns down in Texas right after his travel ban? He says nothing?
Well, we don't know who burned down the mosque. That's
it's still it's an opportunity for him to clarify his intentions. He said nothing about the mosque shooting in Canada.
That's what the mosque burned down in the late stages of the campaign, and I thought, gee, Trump should personally pledge to rebuild the mosque with his own money, and then he would win the election. Okay, and it was pointed out to me that no, this is probably a hoax. Why do we want Trump going along with the hoax? So I think you wait to see who burned down the mosque first.
Well, we know who shot those 5 Muslims in Canada.
That's true.
He said nothing. He complains that our media don't cover foreign terrorist attacks, which, by the way, is a little ironic for somebody whose motto is America first and says we should only care about Americans, but whatever. If he's going to make that critique, maybe he could mention the fact that 5 Muslims were murdered in Canada right after he implemented his travel ban by somebody who was a fan of his.
Do we know he was a fan of his?
Yeah, he liked him on Facebook or whatever. And by the way, he was a fan of... Oh, never mind. I won't go there.
No, he should have said that,
but it all adds up to something much more troubling than he should have said that. It's a coherent, concerted plan, and I think it is in Steve Bannon's head.
So far, you have he failed to do things. Not that there's a coherent, concerted plan.
It is so consistent with Breitbart's whole sensibility. Breitbart is an Islamophobic.
There are things you could do. You could ban the headscarves. You could require teaching. Do all the things in France that they do.
Your message to Muslims is be grateful that they have not been rounded up. Then
what kind of plan is it?
It's just, the idea that we're normalizing everything I just said about what he has said and these pastors he's embracing and so on
when he says
troubling.
It, I'll be on your side.
It's troubling. Now, speaking of...
Pastors think... there's this sort of, what's it called, syncretism. Religions think they're going to heaven. They think the other people aren't going to heaven. That's what it means to be a religion. Why do religions all have to be this namby-pamby thing where they can't say that the other guy is evil? They've been saying that throughout history. That's what a lot of them stand for. Religions aren't always nice, bourgeois, Bob Wright things. They're sometimes sort of pretty mean.
Well, right, but traditionally American presidents have, ever since we started really thinking about this, like 9/11, have tried to avoid embracing people who are saying the most incendiary things. And even if they hadn't been, I'd be saying it's a gross dereliction of duty for them not to.
I'm sure there are people more incendiary than Franklin Graham.
Oh, you could find them, but not in terms of mainstream. Not a lot. Yeah, the guy that he had for the Robert Jeffress, the guy he had in the morning on Inauguration Day. He did find somebody more incendiary than Franklin Graham and said, "Yeah, let's have him too."
Well, it's a little. Well, it's a little like people who hold. I link to people on Twitter, and then they hold me responsible for everything that person has said on Twitter. at some point it becomes 3 degrees removed. But I agree that it's what you say. I would
Not
say
on Inauguration Day.
I would say it's troubling.
Good. I can quote you saying that.
Does not outweigh a wage boost for the bottom fifth of the American workforce.
Now, you wanted to talk about Hitler. Before we turn to that, let me ask you a question. Just the level of competence in the administration. It's like, so Trump said this thing, and this is another, he said this thing. He was down there talking to CENTCOM, and he says, the media intentionally doesn't report on terrorist attacks around the world. And then, so they release this list of terrorist attacks that are underreported, right? And on them, they include San Bernardino and Orlando. Of course, it was wall-to-wall coverage. So it's like, that can't be intentional, right? That's just plain stupid, right? Because that just opens the whole thing up to ridicule.
I think there's an argument that Orlando was, not San Bernardino, but that Orlando didn't get the coverage it ordinarily would have had when you massacre people in a gay nightclub. It got out of the news surprisingly quickly. It was a big deal. I agree, but they somehow managed to. There was this meme that he was really a homosexual. The New York Times wrote a famous, now infamous editorial saying it was all because Republicans had fostered a climate of hate against gays.
Well, that's all different from not covering it.
Well, but that was sort of pushing it out the news door as quickly as possible because it becomes muddled.
What actually pushed it out the door was Trump's tweets.
I think there was an effort to sort of, it was a nuclear bomb, but there was an effort to put a lid on it.
Well, as I recall, what changed the subject was Trump's tweets about it, and then the story became Trump's tweets about it. But
all right, that was one of the ways they put a lid on it.
Well, Trump kind of helped. But anyway, so you don't think there's any incompetence in bringing San Bernardino? Okay, I withdraw the question.
No, San Bernardino, I wouldn't put San Bernardino on this list.
But even Orlando, if you got to explain it like this, I mean, why the distraction? Why don't they just leave off the ones that everybody's obviously going to laugh at? And
there may be a little stray voltage here, First, I think there are a small group of people trying to run a government. They're actually extremely competent, but it's very hard for a small group of people to run a government, especially when the government is hostile to you. I think one of the reasons they rushed through this executive order so quickly is because they were terrified of leaks. If they'd had the whole 2-month process of vetting and showing it to all the cabinet agencies, it would have leaked the first day. It would never happen. So they're paranoid. And what was the point I was driving at?
Well, why did they create?
It's stray voltage. There's this Obama theory that if you get it a little wrong, that's good for you because then you get more publicity. So there's a theory that Obama was intentionally using the pay comparability numbers that he knew were controversial and probably bogus because then he got blowback from the right, and that gave him a second-day story, so there was more attention paid to his talk about pay equity. So maybe Trump figures, what the hell, include everything, go to the extremes, don't hold back, and the controversy helps us. That may be sort of a mild version.
Well, there may be, a general thing about let's just court the ongoing hostility of the media, and then the media hates us will be part of the story, I suppose.
Well, also people are paying it, as somebody said, he got the media to talk about Muslim terrorist attacks for 2 days. That's pretty good. That would be the theory. It wouldn't necessarily mean that I'm hostile. It would mean that I actually get my message across and woo some people in the middle.
Yeah.
Because there's nonstop talk about terrorist attacks. I don't quite buy it, but that's one theory.
Okay. So you wanted to talk about Hitler, and let the record show I'm not the one who brought it up, but go ahead.
No, I just got into this very unsatisfying. Well, first, I've noticed that I wrote about this, a lot of very smart friends of mine are sort of seeing the seeds of fascism in what Trump does. And the seeds are there, but I think it's crazy to extrapolate from there to fascism without a whole lot of thought and let's wait and see what happens. But then Ron Roosevelt, my guy who I respect tremendously, one of the best journalists of our times, wrote a book on Hitler that I haven't read, but everybody says it's fantastic, called Explaining Hitler. And he wrote a piece for the LA Review of Books, which went out of its way to say, Trump isn't Hitler. But then it went and applied the sort of the language you use for when you're dealing with a Hitler. Do you comply or do you normalize this evil person? And there was a whole lot of information in there about how evil Hitler was, stuff that I didn't even realize, and not a whole lot of information about how evil Trump was. It said, he appointed bad cabinet secretaries, and he has these horrible anti-Semitic trolls that troll any journalist who has a Jewish last name. But Hitler, A, he laid out his racist plan. B, he had plans for genocide. C, he had his own stormtroopers who killed people. D, he had his own stormtroopers who ransacked newspaper offices. So when people say, well, Steve Bannon shouldn't have said, to the press they should shut up and listen for a while. Okay, that's incipient fascism. Actually having your stormtroopers ransack a newspaper office is fascism. There's a long way between one and the other. And Ron didn't even put the Steve Bannon comment in his piece. Why? Because I think if you put it in this piece, you realize, and the reader realizes, how pathetic it is compared to the monstrosity of the things that the actual Hitler actually did. So we get these crazy pieces that sort of assume Trump is like Hitler, and then talk about, well, the journalists who are pro-Trump are like the collaborators with Hitler. Well, then you are saying Trump is like Hitler, right? So then you got to justify it. So that was my basic beef, and we had a very unsatisfying internet exchange which wound up with him blocking me.
You're kidding.
No, he blocked me because I thought I was making some joking comment of, I said I don't understand this point, which I really didn't understand. And he said, well, try a dictionary. And I thought that was dismissive, so I sort of tried to sort of defuse it by saying, well, and people say you're crotchety, which he is. He's incredibly crotchety. But he's a great guy. But
and he didn't get the irony. He thought you were just calling him names.
Well, he thought I was just calling him names. It was a classic internet thing where.
And you just did call him a name, by the way, when you said he is crotchety.
No, I said, and people say you're crotchety.
And then you said and then you told me, and he is crotchety. So you are now on record saying he's crotchety, and I'm going to email him about this.
He's a curmudgeonly guy. Well, he won't see this, I hope.
That's why I'm going to email him.
What?
That's why I'm going to email him about it.
Don't email him about it. Don't be.
Well, his piece was interesting. I read it because you mentioned it, and the one interesting thing I hadn't realized.
He's publicly crotchety. We love him because he's crotchety.
Okay,
that's his shtick.
Fine.
He doesn't take any shit.
He once explained to me that he also wrote about the Kennedy assassination, right? And he once explained to me that it was all possible avenues toward conspiracy have been sealed off. I shouldn't even imagine that there was any, as I recall. Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
That could be right. The fun of a Ron Rosenbaum piece is he explores every avenue of conspiracy before he shuts them off.
He was convincing me that yes, Jack Ruby could have just kind of taken it upon himself to shoot. I've always thought that was the smoking gun on there being some larger story to Kennedy was the fact that somebody got this nightclub owner to go shoot this probably mobbed up nightclub owner to go shoot Oswald. That's not the kind of thing, not duty you volunteer for unless there's an incentive.
This is a digression, but if you visit Dealey Plaza, all conspiracy theories vanish because it's tiny.
Oh, I don't buy those kind. No, I meant conspiracy in the sense that someone put Oswald up to it, the inference being coming from the fact that it seems that someone must have put Ruby. Someone wanted Oswald not to talk, is my point.
There's one theory that still survives, the Castro theory. Because he visited the embassy in Mexico City, and did they say, okay, you have these crazy plans, don't let us stop you. I don't think they recruited him.
Anyway, so back to enough Kennedy. Let's talk Hitler. One interesting point in Rosenbaum, in general, when people have said Trump's like Hitler, my reaction has been, I think you're, in a sense, being too kind to Trump. That suggests he has a coherent ideology. Hitler at least had a coherent ideology. Whereas I would say, look, if you're looking for Hitler in the administration, look Bannon. He at least has an ideology. Maybe if you're going to do the analogy, don't don't point your finger at Trump. However, this Rosenbaum piece points out something I didn't know, which is that there have been reputable scholars of Hitler who said that actually, they at least at one point held this view, that actually he started off with no particular ideology, and all he did was what he could get attention for. And it so happened that in an anti-Semitic environment, he could get attention for that, and so he got drawn into it that way. That's interesting.
But in the very piece we're talking about, which we should provide a link to probably.
Yeah, we will.
He says that historian changed his mind.
Right.
When he saw other evidence that Hitler really did have all the plans for genocide all along from a very early stage.
Well, yeah, that part wasn't so clear. I mean, he said, what did he say? He had used the term final solution or something. But it sounded like it was a not totally clear reference in the early. I don't know. I couldn't figure that part out. But anyway, I mean, another thing about Trump and Hitler, which is, as you know, it's been, I think, fairly reliably reported, right? I mean, Marie Brenner's a serious journalist, right? She's a credible journalist. And she's the one who did the legwork and seemed to establish that Trump used to keep a copy of Hitler's speeches by his bedside chest, right? And read them. And it's interesting to me that Trump has, from early on, I mean, one thing. And you know, by the way, this isn't necessarily to say Trump has a Nazi ideology. It's possible he just wanted to read the speeches to ask, how do you use rhetoric to amass power in times of uncertainty? But in any event, Trump never talks about the media without qualifying it with a pejorative adjective. I think it's usually crooked media, maybe sometimes lying media. Hitler did the exact same thing. In German, apparently, lying media is one word. And that was Hitler's go-to phrase. And I don't think it's crazy to speculate. Leave aside Trump's ideology and whether he's anti-Semitic. I actually think the jury is totally out on that. But leave aside his ideology. I don't think it's at all crazy to think that he picked up some rhetorical techniques from Hitler by reading those speeches, which apparently he kept by his bedside.
No, that's not crazy at all. But as you say, it leaves aside the important issue, which is not whether you mock the media using a Hitlerian technique, but whether you actually have Hitler's ideology and anti-Semitism, et cetera, et cetera. And as you say, there's not much evidence for that.
Well, there's plenty of evidence that somewhere in this administration there's a deeply, and we know several places, a deeply anti-Muslim sentiment. So I think in this telling of the story, the Muslims are clearer analogs to the Jews in Germany than the Jews are now, although obviously Trump's supporters, there's a lot of anti-Semitism among some of his more ardent supporters, and there's at least one anecdote suggesting that applies to Bannon. One reasonably, actually credible anecdotal report.
An insanely trivial anecdote.
Well, that he told his wife, "I don't want my kids going to school with Jews." We've
talked about this. I have Jewish friends who don't want to send their kids to that school because their kids come up behaving.
Oh, you know the school in question? You know the school in question?
Yes.
Well, what is it? Tell us.
They like to go to school in Pasadena where people have nice WASP values and they stand in line, and it's so it's a sort of private conversation that two parents of any religion could have, and it was brought up in a divorce proceeding where you dredge up the most evil, nasty thing you can about the other party. And the most nastiest thing was that he said he didn't want to...
No, the nastiest thing was he physically assaulted me, which she also said at one point.
Okay. Well, the nastiest thing is child molestation. They didn't bring that up.
Oh, please elaborate.
There are no children, so...
then what about this? What about the Holocaust Memorial Day resolution?
Sorry?
What about the Holocaust Memorial Day resolution? Don't you think that's a little...
I didn't understand that one at all.
Like why they did it and why they didn't walk it back?
Well, I mean, my best explanation was somebody woke up in the morning and said, "Damn, it's Holocaust Memorial Day. I have to write something quickly. Could you do that?" And they have somebody write it up quickly, and they don't bother.
Yeah, but then they very pointedly did not walk it back, and they had the chance, and they just doubled down. That is what strikes me as odd.
It strikes me as odd too. I don't quite know why they did that. They may have had some They may have had some sort of non-horrible Black Lives Matter, all lives matter rationale. In other words, all lives destroyed in the Holocaust matter, which is true.
They've not previously shown an affinity for Black Lives Matter. I see, as a response to Black Lives Matter, yeah. Well, that doesn't seem to make... to me, it's quite puzzling, and just may show a total lack of orchestration and coordination, where a couple of people individually got asked, why didn't you do this? And they went, and just, I don't know. But it seems strange. Because and maybe they don't have the manpower to do this, but I mean, don't you normally, your new administration, it's this day, and they always do a proclamation on this day. Let's see what the last administration did. Isn't that standard procedure? You can Google it.
You would think. But it's possible they probably don't have that whole vast team in place, nor do they have the experience to know that you could Google it.
I mean, the other thing I'd say, not quite in defense of Steve Bannon, but by way of qualifying evidence of anti-Semitism, certainly Breitbart has attracted its share of that among its audience, at least. But I think
Breitbart, they never come up with they always come up with the same two examples of their horrible pieces, and one of them is a thing about how women are ugly. It's a complete joke piece.
Oh, I'll give you another example of a horrible Breitbart piece. First, let me finish. What I was going to say was, maybe in Bannon's defense, I think to the extent that he's articulated his Clash of Civilizations worldview, it's like Judeo-Christian West against Muslims. So sure. If you want to give him credit for that, fine. But on that note, so the thing about Breitbart is, it's like the dishonest, incendiary headlines, often about Muslims. I mean, it's rabidly Islamophobic. Another, just reinforces my reasons for concern about Bannon. But what about this thing that happened just a couple of days ago? The Rosa Brooks thing. Are you up on that?
Vaguely.
Do you know Rosa?
I met her once. She seemed very nice.
She's very good. She's very smart, very good writer, and has unusual insights into the trouble with American foreign policy, in my opinion. But so she writes this piece, I guess for Foreign Policy, I'm not sure, but talking about, the question like, what happens if Trump gives an order the military considers crazy? Actually, use nukes against China, or she gave a couple of other examples. She said, would the military refuse to carry out the orders? Which is an interesting and legitimate question. And she didn't say I would encourage it. She said, well, it's kind of appalling to think, either way. I mean, it's appalling to think they would carry out, an order to use nuclear weapons, but it's also appalling to imagine the military resisting a presidential order. That's a spooky thing too. And that was about the end of it. So Breitbart runs this piece, and I think the word was suggests. Former Obama administration official suggests coup against Trump, or whatever. I don't have the exact wording. Now you would agree, presumably, that's like a dishonest headline if I've recounted what she said accurately?
I thought she went a little further than that, and I thought it was sort of an anti-Trump fantasizing.
Well, it may have been, but she didn't say. But she didn't say, and then the military deposes Trump. That's what a coup is.
I thought she did.
We can consult the record.
Okay.
But I think I thoroughly read her own account of it. She quoted at length what she actually said, and
I remember reading something and I thought, well, there she crosses the line, but maybe I'm wrong.
In any event, then the legions went, and she's got the trifecta apparently, in terms of subsequent abuse by Breitbart fans. Jewish father, so she got the anti-Semitic stuff. First name that sounds Hispanic, so she got attacked as whatever, Latino or something. And some people, I think, got Rosa Brooks mixed up with Rosa Parks and thought she was black, and so gave her shit on those grounds. I mean, this is the fan base we're dealing with here.
Plus, she's Barbara Ehrenreich's daughter, so everybody who hasn't hired a maid for 20 years because Barbara Ehrenreich told them it was viciously classist to have a maid hates everybody who's associated with Barbara Ehrenreich.
I would think there's a lot you would like in that book, in Barbara Ehrenreich's book. Didn't it call attention to the plight of the white working class?
I like all of Barbara Ehrenreich's books I've read. She's very smart, but I'm just saying that there was a famous comedic piece by a comedian out here called "Fuck You, Barbara Ehrenreich," about how she finally overcame the influence of the essay and went out and hired a maid, and how her life was now 1,000% better, and the maid was happy. It was the whole
Not that Ehrenreich did that, but this person did that. This
so
person
Ehrenreich essay, and it held off on hiring a maid for 20 years.
Yeah,
and it was a big mistake. But anyway, she thought. But that was so. I'm just injecting. I really have become allergic to these people. Oh, I'm so abused by right-wing trolls, and it's become a sort of competitive victimology, and everybody gets pressed for it, and I don't like it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't feel qualified to speak because I'm not in a demographic that gets any kind of ethnic abuse from these people. I get abuse.
I mean, they are out there. They do abuse. The stories are real. They do abuse people. But as Ann Coulter says, what do you think my feed looks like? You know, I mean,
what they call her a wasp, and she's worried that there will be a pogrom against wasps.
No, she just says, I don't whine about how nasty my mail is.
Well, yeah, but again, if you're not part of like an ethnic minority, you don't know what that's like.
Well, she's a woman. She's a right winger. She's hated.
Well,
by
okay, she has grounds, I guess, to talk about the gender.
Eminem just came out with a song about raping her.
About Ann Coulter?
Yes.
And is Eminem, I don't want to sound old and out of touch, but isn't Eminem like a serious...
Correct.
known entity?
Correct.
Well, that's pretty bad.
Anyway, she did complain about that.
As long as we're on the record of virtue signaling about things that are going too far, I also don't think they should have punched Spencer. No, that leads me to... here's a big question. Do you think the so-called resistance is misplaying its hand? On balance, broadly construed, the demonstrations, things that the anti-Trump media is doing, which, and you might construe that pretty broadly, anti-Trump media, and so on. Do you think, because for me it's a real intellectual challenge, like, what is the wise way to oppose this guy?
It's an interesting question. I think the demonstrations at the airports were very effective and had an impact and did not overplay their hand.
Yeah, they were good. They were peaceful. They were great.
Well, they just conveyed the message. No, our notion of America is we take in refugees. Sorry. So Trump should embrace that instead of, and I think he will eventually, or he already has. The media sort of twisting everything, to be against Trump, I think is overplaying his hand and will eventually backfire because people aren't going to, Trump voters are going to just tune it out. And the independents eventually will become to distrust it because they keep getting called out on errors like this Josh Rogan piece. He's a very good reporter. Why does he have to make that error? He doesn't. So
yeah, it's weird.
And CNN should. I mean, you look at MSNBC, you look at Fox, you think I'm going to be the network that people trust. We're going to give both sides. It's going to be fun and lively. And instead, CNN has this pretty much 80% oppositional stance to the administration, which I don't understand. I don't think that's doing them any good. I don't think it's doing the cause of fighting Trump any good.
Where does the oppositional stance show up? I see it in like...
And it's all like, here's what Trump said, paren, and it's a lie. I mean, it's all,
Are they using the lie word? Because this is an issue I have with the New York Times. I mean, it's just like Trump in a lie, or Trump, what was it, repeats lie about voting... fraud. Now, first of all, you don't know that.
Right.
You never know. You very rarely know when someone says something that you know to be false, that they know it's false. Sometimes you do, but you didn't in this case. And with Trump, that's a huge question mark because nobody can figure out the extent to which he deludes himself.
I use lie in my books to mean not with regard to Barbara Ehrenreich, actually. Because one of the stats is, everybody knows that welfare recipients only go on for a short period of time. well, that's one of these facts that turn out to be bullshit, of course. And I said it was a lie, meaning it was said recklessly and she should have known better. Not that she thought it was a lie. Obviously,
well, if you look it up, if you look up lie in the dictionary, Jen, most dictionaries' first meaning is, uttering a falsehood with intent to deceive. So conscious understanding that it's a falsehood is part of the definition.
I was using the second meaning.
Okay, but first of all, historically, for good reasons, newspapers have used that definition and not call people liars. Moreover, historically, they wouldn't even call it a falsehood, which is just kind of like good epistemology because it's not something you can disprove. It could be that tomorrow Trump will show us 3 million illegitimate votes. We haven't disproven that. There's just no supporting evidence. And the Washington Post played it exactly right. They said unsupported claims. That's what it is, and that's all you can really say. And so first of all, as a matter of just proper journalistic procedure, I think that's the way you should do it. But also, I think it actually hurts the resistance when media go too far like this. It fires up the base, confirms this media versus Trump narrative, and as you said, it's just bad. And the Times has been worse than the Post in this particular regard.
I agree. The third element of it is this weird thing we saw in the Super Bowl where corporate America sort of tries to undermine Trump.
I love that Coca-Cola ad, which is a 2-year-old or 3-year-old ad, by the way. But anyway,
I didn't like the Coca-Cola ad. I thought it was cheap.
What didn't you like?
Well, it was
the ethnic diversity.
I like ethnic diversity.
It was like a Hallmark card. Yes,
it was a heavy-handed slap at Trump, and there's a reason.
But it wasn't. It was made Mickey, it was made. The ad was made 3 years ago. I remember seeing it. What?
A lot of these ads were made, as was pointed out, when people thought Hillary was going to be elected president.
No, this was like 3 years ago, so it wasn't made as a slap against Trump.
But you can repurpose things and use them as a slap in the face.
I thought it was courageous on Coca-Cola's
it just
part.
Seems like bad business. It seems like there's going to be.
Well, maybe that's why I call it courageous.
But there are all these. But it's like we're all living in the journalist, the journalist private messaging group now. Everybody is trying to outdo the next guy in terms of see how brave and anti-Trump I could be, and that, if you remember right, that caused very sensible people to say very stupid things, and I think we're going to see the same thing here.
I am concerned about the resistance going too far, counterproductively far. At the same time, I mean, I think, it's interesting. It is virtually elites versus Trump, right? I mean, there aren't that many elites, as sociologists define them. You are one of the few who actually support Trump, right?
I think that's right.
And it's kind of fascinating to watch. I've never seen anything like this. Like just the Super Bowl commercials. We had several different commercials. Like, what was the company, Lumber 84 or 84 Lumber, 85 Lumber?
There's 85 Lumber. The one, none of those bothered me. They cut out the shot of a wall in the 84 Lumber ad.
Yeah, but it was available online. Did you see the one online?
Right. I saw the one online. I saw it on the news. But bizarrely, the one that really annoyed me most was Audi. And that didn't have to do with Trump. That was about sex, pay equity, and sex discrimination.
Yeah, and it turns out there are no women on their board of...
There are no women on their board, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, it used these pay equity numbers that, the ones we were talking about before that may well be bogus, and why use them as if they're truth? And it sort of implied that America was a much worse place. It implanted in young girls' minds this idea that they are going to be immediately discounted, which happens sometimes, but in a lot of the American workplace, including every place I've worked, it has not happened. When a woman speaks up, people don't immediately disregard it. It's more.
I think sometimes we don't notice the way these things are being perceived by people who don't share our gender. I mean, like at the New Republic, you might say that, but I think the women at the New Republic, when you and I were there, felt neglected and marginalized.
Oh, that's true, but that was the New Republic.
Okay, well then you have worked at a place that this happened at.
And maybe the Silicon Valley is one of those places. No, my point was, I have a picture of an Audi with a swastika painted on the side, okay? Audi has a big brand problem, okay? If people really wanted to talk about what the brand Audi means, they would not be happy with the commercial results because Audi was one of Hitler's racing cars. So it took all my restraint not to post this picture on the web. I think I could get huge points for this. It was just annoying to see, it's like, let's let the brand, leave the brand stuff be, Audi. I don't think you want to bring that stuff up, what your brand stands for. It doesn't stand for pay equity. It stands for Hitler.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't mean yeah, it does. I mean, I'll trust you on that. But it wasn't
past that. But why
is Audi now? No, Audi's not part of Volkswagen. It's part of.
Yes, it is.
Is it now? But it wasn't originally, right?
No, it's been alive for a long time.
Okay. So what else?
It wasn't originally.
What else?
But they did have swastikas on the side of their cars.
So these are actual. Wait. So you mean this is a picture from during World War II?
1933.
Oh, before 30. I see.
And the commentary all says, well, Audi rarely had the swastika on the side of their car. This is one of the rare exceptions. But I think.
So you mean they made cars and on the showroom floor put swastikas on them? This is our Nazi model?
No, they had famous championship race cars with famous drivers, and they had swastikas painted on them. Mercedes did too. I mean, it's not just Audi. So nobody.
So they were identifying with Hitler's party in the early 30s.
I think it was a patriotic thing to do. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why they did it. Let them explain.
I mean, strictly speaking, anyway. Okay. Right. Anything else you want to say about Hitler or Trump?
No. I said my piece there.
Well, quickly, what about the President Bannon meme? Which I encouraged early on precisely because it might undermine Bannon's power because Trump would find it so threatening, which so far seems to be unfolding as planned.
Well, also, it's very easily stymied. All that Bannon has to do is give an interview where he doesn't seem like this horrible figure that he's been portrayed as, and it sort of dissipates. Plus, there's the theory that, I mean, it's much easier for him to do that, for example, than the previous bogeyman, the Koch brothers, who, they're going to give an interview, they're going to seem like severe libertarians, right? They are severe libertarians. So they're not going to dispel it. But Bannon can easily dispel it with a few choice sentiments, and then where are you?
I think if the media continues to portray him as the power behind the throne, that will continue to drive Trump nuts regardless of what Bannon says. Now, maybe it's a theme that you can't sustain. You just can't keep... Time Magazine can't keep putting out cover stories on this, but...
Bannon's a very smart guy. I mean, he seemed like, I tried to get on his radio show in New Hampshire, and I didn't make prime time, but I made the after show extras for the web or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to hear him talk for 2 hours in the corner of this diner in New Hampshire. He didn't say anything offensive. He's a smart guy. He's perfectly capable of giving.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
Ideology without doing all the things that, even if, which I dispute, he harbors these horrible sentiments in the back of his mind, he could easily beat this back. So I think it's a foolish strategy.
No, I don't think it's just in the back of his mind that he has said enough on the record for it to be a plausible inference that he really sees the future as a death struggle between Islamic civilization and Judeo-Christian civilization. I don't think that is at all a wild inference from things he's actually said.
Who was the strategist who came up with the idea of containment?
George Kennan?
George Kennan. Apparently George Kennan had some wacky ethnic views too. So if
he had been the most important advisor in an administration that was implementing those ideas, I would worry. But
I just think,
and I just want to emphasize how so much, kind of plays into this. And this gets back to what in Trump's utterances do we attribute to him and what to Bannon? So, for example, when he says the media is not covering terrorism around the world, well, one interpretation is that's a ploy to make the media defensive so that they'll give a little more airtime to the next terrorist attack in Europe, even if it's on a fairly small scale. And that, in turn, feeds the perception of global struggle against Islam, terrifies Trump's base, maybe moves a few people into Trump's base. And so if it is a tactical utterance in that sense, you have to ask, like, where are the tactics coming from? Is this something Bannon has said to him repeatedly? Because, see, I read Trump, I read Trump's basic algorithm as, what can I do to get attention today, ideally favorable attention? What can I do? I think it's almost, the guy is like a laboratory rat. And I think...
I'm not denying that some strategy like that might be at work. It seems to be. But it is true that the media downplays Muslim crime. Look at Sweden, where they stopped collecting statistics on, connecting crime and ethnicity. Because, as somebody said, what good would it do you to know that? Well,
who stopped?
There's a PC tendency, and also he obviously seems really concerned with terrorist attacks on American soil. Otherwise, why would he have this gratuitous fight with the Australian Prime Minister over 1,500 refugees, which Obama had agreed to take, unless he was really worried that these refugees shouldn't be in America and they were going to cause trouble?
Wait,
so
who quit collecting statistics in Sweden or wherever?
This is just, don't press me on this. This is something I read on the web. That
if you read it in Breitbart, I would try to dislodge it from your brain immediately.
No, there's a lot of it in Coulter's book. Coulter is very convincing that they just do not collect statistics on immigrants.
Who is they? Who is they?
The government.
Well, who cares? We're talking about the American media.
The media especially. The media always describe it as, a 25-year-old young man. Whereas if
well, if that's all you know, that's all you should say.
They don't know. They know that he's a Muslim terrorist, or they know he's an immigrant. And they try to cover it up. She has example after example. I mean, maybe they do it less now than they used to.
I think there's a reluctance to mention ethnicity in general. I mean, there are times when the police are saying the suspect is a black male, but the media doesn't report that. They just say it's a man. I mean, there's a reluctance on ethnicity in general, but the idea that they downplay terrorist attacks, I mean, if they're not on American soil, that inherently is a little less relevant to an American audience.
No, but
right. The big ones do. I mean, there was wall-to-wall coverage of the big attacks in France. Charlie Hebdo and the nightclub, the concert.
Yeah, they got a lot of publicity. I agree. I mean, he's saying there are all these other ones that they ignore. So I don't know, but give him points for this. He's trying to justify his pause in, people coming to America, and he's saying, I'm worried about domestic terrorism, and it's really a problem.
Well, again, the alternative is, I mean, again, to the extent that this is more of a political tactic and more of a sophisticated one, again, I don't want to bring up Hitler, but as long as you brought him up, Mickey, authoritarians who are becoming more authoritarian, one thing they need to do is marginalize institutions that are rivals for power. The media, the judiciary, and Trump is doing that. He's setting up the whole judiciary to be blamed if there's another terrorist attack.
Well,
and you can't mention media without saying crooked media or lying media. So you can, one plausible interpretation is, and I don't know, I'm agnostic on where this is heading, but a plausible interpretation of a lot of what he does is this is out of the authoritarian handbook.
Well, maybe as Ron says, there may be authoritarian impulses or autocratic impulses. But if the Supreme Court says you can't do this and he obeys the Supreme Court, what kind of fascist is he? He's not much of a fascist.
Right. So far, hearteningly, he has respected court rulings. But I gotta say, it's a little troubling that we've gotten to a point where we are grateful that the president is respecting court rulings. 4 years ago, nobody would have commented on it because we didn't have a maniac in the White House.
Oh, Trump's a maniac. We agree on that, and so we're worried about things we didn't used to be worried about.
Wait, you agree he's a maniac, but you still support him?
Even in the tweet where he calls the guy a so-called judge, he says, we will overturn it. Well, that's, at least for now, accepting that the court system is where he's going to... He didn't say, we will defy it.
Right.
He said, we will overturn it.
Right.
So
And I'm just saying it's bad times when people are spending time on this kind of like hermeneutics to figure out whether the president will or will not obey a court ruling.
Well, that was an argument against him, was that, that Trump is he's a politician like no other because we don't trust him to obey the Supreme Court. In fact, there have been presidents who've defied the Supreme Court. I think Andrew Jackson did once. But
do you have a psychological reading on Trump? I mean, you just called him a maniac, and I kind of agree. I mean, it's almost more complicated than that. But like, I don't think I've ever encountered anybody like this guy, and it's just so weird.
I don't, but there was actually an odd piece by a man named Ron Rosenbaum interviewing Trump when Trump had plans to bring a nuclear arms treaty.
Wait, is this a different Ron Rosenbaum?
No, same one in during the Reagan years in '84 when there was all the stuff about MIRVs and dense pack and the MX missile and how do we get the Russians to, we're worried about the Russians stealing a strategic advantage and the nuclear freeze. And Trump actually wanted to intervene and cut a deal, and he had all these plans. And, that dovetails with the Mein Kampf by the bedside. He sees himself as, poor Donald Trump, only he's stuck being a billionaire real estate mogul when really he's destined to lead America to greatness. Obviously, you wouldn't run for president unless you had that fantasy. So why isn't that the megalomania? I mean, John Edwards had that fantasy. Everybody who runs.
But it's just there's just no evidence that he's ever paid much attention to policy or even politics. I mean, do you remember when
evidence? I just gave you evidence at 84 piece by Ron Rosenbaum where he's talking about throw weights and and he's read up on that.
I think he prepped for that. I mean, do you remember when it became clear that when Hillary picked Tim Kaine for vice president, Trump thought she'd pick Tom Kaine? I mean, Tom Kaine is like a generation older and a Republican and had been a governor in the state neighboring Trump's. If Trump had paid any attention to regional politics, he'd know it couldn't have been Tom Kaine.
Right, it could have been Frederick Douglass.
There you go again. Great guy. I think,
that's the guy. But
Fred Douglass. Great job. He's doing a great job. And I think he could get Employee of the Month at this rate.
I mean, I could, if that's Trump's universal thing he says about somebody he knows somebody about, nothing about, I could come up with a better one than that.
Yeah, you should be a little vaguer, like on the present tense, past tense thing, like if you don't know if they're dead. More like, who doesn't appreciate Frederick Douglass?
Great American.
Just stop
Great
right
American.
there.
Great American.
Well, we end on a note of agreement. And nothing else you want to say?
I have one point, which is sort of, you made a statement against your side. I'll make a statement against my side, which is, I worry that the justice, when I was a clerk in a court in California, the attorney general would come in with these briefs, and they were all completely unsatisfying because they always said, we have plenary power, give us all the power. There's no limit to our power. The Constitution says we have all the power. We're prosecutors. We can do anything we want. And you just thought, fuck you. Of course I got to put limits to your power, okay? They were, and I think the Justice Department's doing the same thing with the Trump thing. They're saying we have plenary power. We can do anything we want. And the courts are going to look at that and say, no, you don't. We're here for a reason. And it's so much more effective if you say, yes, there might be limits to our power. Maybe if Trump said, I ban all Muslims in the United States, that could be an Establishment Clause case. But this isn't anywhere near that, Your Honor. That's just so much more effective. And I'm just going crazy because I sense this.
Isn't there kind of a talent shortage in the administration generally, including I read part of one of their legal filings and it was like incoherent.
Well, by the time the filings are almost always incoherent. By the time they get up to the Solicitor General's office, they're much more sophisticated. The actual Solicitor General himself, in oral argument with the court, will get these tough hypotheticals and he'll start to make concessions. But they might have a chance to win some of these cases lower down.
Yeah. It sounds like, from what little I've read, they're on pretty strong ground legal. I mean, at least the law itself gives very broad discretion to the president, the immigration law.
Yeah, and they're in the process of losing it, which is what's so frustrating. I mean, there's a very good piece in the National Review how Anthony Kennedy might not be on the right of this. He might be on the left, in which case they lose 5-3.
Well,
and even if they get Gorsuch, they lose 5-4.
As you said, Trump sure didn't help himself with that so-called judges thing, man.
Yeah. I agree. Anyway, that's all I had to say.
Okay. Well, in case you're wondering whether I forgive you for supporting Trump, I have not yet granted you forgiveness, but maybe on another episode.
Oh, I forgot to give you the best thing that happened to me today.
You're changing the subject, but go ahead.
This is not a serious note. I was crossing the street and it was raining, and a famous movie star offered me her umbrella and struck up a conversation. She was very nice.
Who was she? Probably a liberal who thought you were homeless.
Could be.
Who was it?
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Really? That's serious, man.
I think it was, even if it wasn't Jamie Lee Curtis, I'm gonna pretend it was.
Yeah, if I were you.
I'll look it up. I think it was. Don't use this in promotional because it might not be true.
No, I think that's our headline coming out of this conversation is Jamie Lee Curtis befriends Trump supporter.
She certainly didn't know I was a Trump supporter.
Yeah.
We whined about the Beverly Hills city government.
You wisely avoided the federal politics.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, see you next time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye.
I have one more thing.
Oh, okay.
As part of my campaign to get back in Ron Rosenbaum's good graces, I said I would be happy to do a Blogging Heads with him.
Yeah. That would be good, but he probably won't take you up on it, right?
I don't think he'll take me up on it.
But the pressure is built now that you've put it out there like this challenge and taunted him.
It didn't work for Ezra Klein.
Sure didn't.
Much to my... So I don't think
for those viewers who were not born when that happened, Ezra Klein, back when he was an upstart, did a Blogging Heads in which he threw down, literally, he got a glove, said, I'm throwing down the gauntlet, I challenge Mickey Kaus to debate, and you, I'm not going to say, no tienes cojones, okay? Pero, no tienes cojones.
Did he say that?
No, I'm saying that because you did not, you did not take him up. You refused, you ducked him, as Muhammad Ali used to say. You ducking me.
I did duck him, but in this case, tengo muchos cojones, and I think the real word is huevos.
Por qué?
I think the real word is huevos. But anyway, I just don't think he wants to screw around with me. But if he does, you could put pressure on him. That's why I bring it up.
I think he may. Is he mad at me for some reason? I have this list of people who may be mad at me for reasons I don't remember. But I'd be happy to see you two face off.
If you set that list next to the list of everybody you know, are they sort of
more or less? Yeah, I could save a lot of paper by just printing it out once. Yes.
Yeah. Same here. Okay.
Okay. See you around.
See you, Bob.